Welcome to People More Interesting Than Me, the podcast, where I step back and let fascinating individuals take the spotlight. Join me as I sit down with incredible guests who captivate and inspire, showcasing their stories, experiences, and wisdom that make them truly extraordinary. Tune in for engaging conversations that'll leave you enlightened and entertained. At least I'm entertained. Our guest this week is John Oakes, the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Fast, which delves into the numerous benefits of fasting, from improved metabolic health to enhanced mental clarity. With a deep understanding of both the scientific research and practical applications, John brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. Join us as we discuss the transformative power of fasting, debunking common myths, and learn how to incorporate the ancient practice into our modern lives. Whether you're a seasoned faster or just curious about the potential benefits, this episode promises to be both enlightening and inspiring. Enjoy. Today I have with me is John Oakes, author, and I found your book because I was looking for I'm kind of the guy who when I pick up a book, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but when I pick up a book, I'm afraid to start it and waste that like 20 pages or something, like the sunk cost of it, which is something that I don't know. I don't know if other people feel that way because I get anxiety if I can't finish a book, and it's like always lingering over me. It's like something that's due in 3 weeks and I just procrastinate because I'm not interested in the book. And in the end, the main thing I think I've learned over the past like 10 years is you should read what you love. Like if that keeps you from reading, like you should just read what you love, and the other, like, just keep reading, because if you don't, then you're kind of at a brick wall and you'll never open yourself up to other stuff. But getting back to your book, I found your book. I think I was looking at similar stuff of what I had already read, like Breath and maybe Range, if you've heard of that book, which is talking kind of like about um, route. It basically features on people growing up in a range of skills rather than a narrowed field, like kind of like Tiger Woods was, but like, and not just on a like a athletic or physical level. It was also like music. It was also like different tracks of literature, everything. It was kind of saying like if you can kind of feel out yourself and your senses and your characteristics and your tools, like you can do anything. So anything that kind of opens my perspective or advances my I guess knowledge tools, I kind of like dig into and I like. And I saw your book and I was like, this sounds kind of similar to lines, and it even has like a political slash religious kind of like connotations as well. Like the way I see it, and obviously I haven't even read it yet, but the summary is fascinating to me, that fasting is a tool in itself, because when I was growing up, it was kind of like a ritual, because I grew up Catholic. And I mean, all the religions have that kind of like it, and you can agree or disagree, but from what I've seen, every religion has their fasting, like in a shape or
Just
form.
about, just about everyone. Yeah.
So besides me talking all this crap, can you kind of give us a little bit about your background, and then we can start digging into what made you start to write this book?
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Michael. I really, I always enjoy any opportunity to really talk about the subject, and then less so about the book. I just got interested in the subject, and the book came out of that. But I appreciate your interest in the topic. This is my first book. I've been a longtime editor. I've been a publisher at all sorts of different little independent publishing houses. And over the years, I've edited literally hundreds and hundreds of books some of which I've quietly written a good portion of, but my name is not in there. But a few years ago, I decided I really wanted to write a book, and I started out actually as a reporter for the Associated Press many eons ago, and I wanted to go back to that, and so I stepped back from publishing and editing, and uh, the fast came before this book, my fasting, and I just got really interested in the process, and I undertook a long fast at the end of what I thought was the end of the Trump administration, and just wanted to sort of purge myself, and there was so much uh, uh, nastiness going on, at least from my perspective, and I just wanted to get it out of my system, and I just spontaneously wanted to do a long fast, and I hadn't really done that ever before. I have a Jewish background, and in Judaism, as you may know, there's Yom Kippur, which is a day of atonement, which is a day of fasting, and it's a really big deal. You fast for one day, and everyone gets very excited by this. So I decided to fast for a week, and just as I was fasting, I became interested in the history and what was happening to my body. And there are tons of books out there that tell you that fasting's great for you, and even some that tell you a little bit about what it does to your body. But it wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted a deep dive into the philosophy and to really the science of it. And so I suddenly realized, I could do this. And so I did.
Okay. What made you? I know you said it was out of at the end of the Trump, the whole like
Yeah.
hubbub with that. What made you choose fasting? I mean, like,
Yeah.
how was it? I mean, like, was it already in the back of your mind,
But
or
not really. It was really a spontaneous decision. I wanted to sort of get that. I wanted to get past that period of my life, and I wanted to purge myself. I wanted to
reset, kind of?
reset, which, and in fact, literally is what a lot of researchers say that fasting does, that kind of long-term fasting can do for your body. I am not, by the way, proselytizing for fasting. I think it's really a fascinating process. It's not for everyone. It doesn't, it's not going to cure everything from the common cold to cancer. It can be helpful, but you have to be in relatively good health to do it. And and I think it's essential to have limits. Fasting without end is anorexia, and that's a mental disorder. I do not think I have that. As you can see, I'm pretty healthy weight. Um, but that's something that people need to be aware of. There's, all these eating disorders that we have to. For me, fasting is much more than just about not eating. It's about encountering the power of absence, and about not only about going through the process of not eating, but just stepping off of the treadmill of daily routine and reconsidering your place in the world, your relationship to your friends and family, to society. And I know that I'm not alone in thinking that way because, I mean, as you said, you yourself said, I mean, first of all, it pops up in ancient philosophies. It's all over the Stoics and even the Epicureans, and all of the ancient Greek philosophies have this concept of withdrawal and pulling back and taking time to consider our world around us in a measured way. And that's often done through fasting. In fact, there was one ancient philosopher, Antisthenes, who was a student of Socrates. I'm going to try not to get into
No,
too
you're
much
fine. You're
detail here,
fine.
but this guy, he had uh, he used as a curse to his enemies. He would say, or he at least was recorded saying this once, may your children live in luxury. The idea being that luxury corrupts the soul, and it diverts you from what's really important in life. And this concept, you can find it as you in modern religions, and certainly Catholicism has Lent, Islam has Ramadan. There are fasting days in Judaism and Hinduism, and of course Buddhism is founded around the whole idea of withdrawal and stepping back. And am I giving you too
No,
much?
no,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about all the stuff that I'm thinking of. Like,
Yeah.
I've never thought of it this way, but if you're rich, you're poor, you're from different countries,
Yeah.
I see fasting kind of as a kind of like
A privilege.
well, I would say a privilege, but an equalization. Like if you're poor, you're rich, you
Absolutely. I
all are on the same spectrum.
Totally. I'm so glad. I thought you were going to make a potential criticism, which I hope I try to address, is that often I think people who haven't thought about it or encountered it, they see fasting as something that's done by, comes from a place of privilege. But in fact, when you look at people who fast, like, fasting is they're in Ethiopia and Ireland, and that fasting is not necessarily associated with wealth. It's a spiritual thing much more than it is about wealth and having so much that you can afford to fast. It's even people who don't have a lot. This idea of stepping back and considering the situation, that is a kind of fasting, and a real sort of fasting.
But yeah, the way I think about it is like, a lot of people have some debilitating disease, like mental, biological, even something that's a physical neurological issue. And you can't really, we're not at, at a technological level where you can actually feel someone's pain as like emotional or physical. And fasting just feels like some way of kind of like, hey, kind of, can I get on your level? Can I understand?
Absolutely, absolutely. And sorry, didn't mean to
Oh, no,
interrupt.
you're fine. Keep going.
Because I think often one of the consequences of fasting in a group, as Catholics or whomever, Muslims do, is that you bond with the other people who are fasting together. Apart from the stated purpose of the fasting, thinking, or in Judaism, you're supposed to think on your sins. Fasting, I think, is seen more as a punitive thing in Judaism, and you've sinned, and you should think on that. But apart from that, there's also this incidental bonding with everyone else who's fasting, and and that I think is, I mean, I kind of prefer what I learned about Ramadan. It was very different. It's a period of joy. You fast from sunup to sundown, but then at the end of that, you have this feast with your family and friends, and it's a time of coming together. It's not a mournful time, or it's not supposed to be. It's you think about your allegiance or your dedication to God, and then you come back to family, and that's sort of a very nice duo. And in Catholicism, and Protestantism, there's much more this tradition of we fast because we have sinned, and that's more in the Jewish tradition of original sin, and we are
And
tainted.
do you feel like, obviously this is to an extreme, but like shared trauma? You obviously it's not trauma, but it's kind of like everyone's suffering together. It kind of makes it like strong bonding. And that's, I mean, if you don't have strong bonding, do you have religion? You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's true. And certainly in Judaism, I can't speak for other religions, but everyone would complain like crazy when Yom Kippur rolls around, and talk about being hungry. And the irony is, as I discovered, and first, everyone's body is different, of course, but we all share certain characteristics. And the irony is that if you're on a long-term fast, the first day or two are a little uncomfortable. But once you get to about day three, these things called ketone bodies, and I'm sure you've heard of ketosis, and if you're an extreme athlete, that kicks in after like a few hours of high performance. Maybe is evident I am not and have never been an extreme
But
athlete.
yeah, it's
But
popular
after
with
like
people
day
doing carbs or carb
yes,
free and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, so you get this chemical rush, and this incredible cocktail of stuff goes through your system, hitting you around day three, and different people have different reactions. There's the labor leader Cesar Chavez, whose name you may have heard of, who was a great leader of the in the 70s. For United Farm Workers, he used to go on these really long fasts of like 2 or 3 weeks, which, by the way, just if anyone's listening, I don't recommend. I don't think that's healthy. It's not, it's just an extreme thing. But Chavez would say that around about day 5 of a fast, he would begin to have absolutely perfect memory. So he could have a conversation with someone and recount it word by word, and remember things from weeks ago. I never had that experience, but people do report feeling this sort of this they get supercharged with these chemicals, and you do feel this sort of calmness and serenity, and that's from you get a surge in serotonin and in something called BHB, and in this other stuff called the endocannabinoids, which as it sounds, they're related to cannabis, and your body produces this stuff. It's really amazing what your body does, one's
Yeah.
body does.
And you could tell me if I'm completely wrong in this. Let's say 2 months ago, I was reading a study and I should have pulled it up before this interview, but it was a study done on fasting. And I think it was maybe a 7-day fast, but it was saying that I should have pulled up the study before I state this, but that cancer cells would kind of dramatically have been reduced because it kind of starved these cancer cells out. Obviously, I think they had only recommended you do this once a year, but I mean, especially for, like, I've got like an autoimmune disease, and that's the reason I exercise. So people who have like had a history of cancer or all that stuff, that doesn't seem too far-fetched 7 days out of the year rather than, chemo and like all these things that could come back.
I'm obviously not a, or maybe not obviously, I'm not a doctor, and I don't think this stuff can or should substitute for what has been researched and has been people spend a lot of time and billions of dollars researching stuff, and I don't think we should throw modern medical practices out the window. However, it is true. I haven't read this the study you're referring to, but there is a history of fasting, specifically with cancer, and it's been shown that people who are undergoing chemotherapy, if they fast before they take get their medicine, their cells are more susceptible to getting the cure. And there have been a lot of studies that have shown that basically almost all of us, we eat much more than we need, and cutting back is really good for the system. I mean, I think apart from the spiritual benefits, which I think are real, we're at a stage of history where the problem seems to be, for most of us, I'm not saying everyone, but for most of us, the problem is overloading our system with too much stuff, and we just sort of get we get drowned in a sea of junk, and it not only objects and concepts, but food. And it's just better for you to cut back a little bit. It's not bad to be a little hungry on a regular basis, but I'm not, I also am very, very aware. I want to quickly say this is important that, there are plenty of people out there who are hungry and can't get enough to eat. However, there are also, at least in this country, plenty of people who have way too much to eat. And I count myself among them.
Yeah, because most recently I saw something, I guess it doesn't really fade to that because it was talking to how like, we're at an age where food production and food harvesting is so like large right now. I mean, maybe especially in America where we have so much food for the United States that it's kind of like all these companies need to push harder and harder to get this food on people.
It's the number one, according to whatever US agency I cited in the book. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's the number one component of landfill, excess food in the United States, which
So
surprised me.
how do you with such a, like TikTok, social networking, like blasting you left and right, like basically having a food seizure, how do you even contemplate fasting in such kind of like like such a loud, explosive culinary assault? Like, how do you do that?
I think what I think what interests me is and I think a lot of people recognize this thing I mentioned earlier, which is the power of absence. It's a real strength, and it's, to use an overused word, it's a form of empowering oneself. That you don't have to do anything. You just need to sit back, make sure you have the relatively good health, drink plenty of fluids, take care of yourself, and you can go on a fast. And if you're a reasonably healthy person, you can fast for a bunch of days without any problem. When I discovered that, for me, it was I just found it, as I say, empowering. I had never considered that I could comfortably go a week or more without food, and I can. I know I can because I've done it. I do it all the time. And I mean, in between, I then go back to my old habits, but I know I can, and that's a very interesting thing. Apart from that focus on food, it also gives you this, at least for a period of time, you do experience some kind of serenity and peace. And when you go on these long fasts, or even people who do it intermittently, though to me that seems much harder, though I'm sure plenty of people disagree. But um, you find you have so much more time. You're not out there buying food, cooking it, preparing it. I mean, maybe you're not a person who buys and cooks food, but then you're not going to a restaurant and eating it or ordering out. You have a lot more time in your day. And how do you fill that time? Well, you can just do whatever you do and, watch a show or something, but you can also use it to maybe think about how you're spending time on this earth. And we're all proceeding towards our end, and how you want to fill that up, maybe spend time with your friends or family, or learn something that you've always put off doing. I mean, it opens up a huge amount of possibilities, and it is a gift, and it's free to everyone. And that, I like that. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to, you don't even need to buy my book, although it has a lot about the history and philosophy in there. But that's what I think is its strength. And in answer to your question, yes, in the short term, there's nothing one can do to fight marketing and consumerism. But in the long term, fasting is, I think it's here to stay. I think it's always been with us.
So right now, I mean, I took on a light form of fasting. What do I do? I stop eating at 8 and I don't eat till like 11 the next day, like a small one, and then I pick
So
up
you
at
stop eating at 8 p.m. or 8.
8 p.m. and then I don't eat till 11 a.m. So basically a 16-hour stretch. What would you say? And I find it, I mean, with coffee, I find it pretty kind of not easy, but kind of like smooth transition, if that makes sense. Um, I don't know. And like, after the first week, you kind of, you've got that, that raw hunger. And just this is taking me off my point, but I wanted to state that it kind of makes you more human, if that
Mhm.
makes sense, because
Yeah.
you're basically you're denying these animal impulses, like your medulla, that you crave food, and it kind of makes you feel like you're more than an animal. You know what I mean? Like you're able to make decisions, you're able to fight what, you know, your animalistic side, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs that you don't
Wow.
that you've
Yeah.
always like, pounded back and not even at a second thought. And I feel like that really expands your neural pathways instead of going directly to one of those.
Absolutely. There's this thing, the our enteric nervous system, which is sometimes called the brain in the gut, is huge. It's second only to the brain in the number of neurons. There are hundreds of millions of neurons situated just in our gut, in our intestines, and our stomach. And it obviously depends on the dog, but it's roughly approximate to the number of neurons in a dog's brain. And I don't want to mess up the numbers. I should have them at be able to quote them to you, but as they say, you can look it up. We have this sort of second smaller brain that we carry around with us, and it's always telling us, I need, you gotta give me more. And the brain in our head is really in sometimes usually it follows along, but sometimes it's good to assert control over the brain and our gut and to say, hold on, we're the body that we both inhabit. We're sort of sounds schizophrenic, doesn't it? But it's true. We all have this thing. And I mean, it's good to, as you say, it's good to assert one's agency over the physical aspect of our lives once in a while. I mean, I think that's healthy uh, from a mental, not only from a physical point of view, from a mental point of view. It's good to do that once in a while. You don't want to become obsessed with that. As I say, there's that danger, that's anorexia or, self-harm. We do not want to do that. But I think judicious cutting back can actually be hugely strengthening, both morally and physically.
So, and I kind of pushed myself off this when I was talking about my 16-hour fast. How would you try to get someone who's kind of on the fence about fasting? How can they kind of start just dipping their toes in it
Well,
to
Michael,
try?
I've driven other people crazy who sort of ask me this question because I don't. I'm not. I think it's really interesting. I don't say it's for everyone. I don't think you even have to go on a fast to benefit from what it can impart. Just thinking about how we get through the day and how so much of what we do is automatic. That most of us when we wake up, we that except for you and power to you, we make ourselves a couple of eggs or bacon and coffee, and then around lunchtime you eat again, and then maybe have a snack, and then it's I don't think one has to actually even fast to benefit from it, but um if you decide you're going to do it, and you're, as I say, in reasonably good health, um, I'd say the easiest thing, it's always easier with a partner if you've never done it before, or a friend, and you do it together, and then you can complain to each other over the first couple of days. And then it's actually kind of cool. It's exciting to see one's body, how it adjusts and how your body's yelling at you, that brain in your gut is yelling at you saying, you haven't fed me. What is going on? You need to go out and grab your spear and hunt down an antelope for me and eat it. And you're saying, to it. No, we're just going to see this thing through. And I would say, I'd also say, you do not need to go to one of these clinics and pay, I don't know if I'm sure you can't have missed hearing about this. It's, all over the place, these so-called health clinics, which charge anywhere from hundreds to thousands and thousands of dollars a day for the privilege of withholding food from you. This is not necessary. You do not need to do that, assuming, as I say, you're in reasonably good health, drink water and tea or vegetable broth. And you don't have to be severe about it. You can go into it easy. The other thing I'd say is that if you do go on a long fast, 5 days or more, when you come out of it, you should take it easy too. You don't want to stuff yourself with a steak or whatever. You want to gradually go back into the land of the living, because there's something called refeeding syndrome, which is a medical condition, and it can, basically lead to system overload, and you can wind up in the hospital if you stuff yourself too fast, too quickly.
So now that you mention that, I just have a question, and you might not have an opinion on it, but with all this talk of, I know I'm late on this, but Ozempic and
Yeah.
stopping your hunger, what's your thoughts on that? Like easy way out, or kind of defeating the whole?
It's interesting. Nobody's asked me that, but I think Ozempic is the friend of a market economy, because that way you can keep buying stuff and overstuffing yourself, and then you just take the medicine and then it goes, I don't think it's really an answer to overconsumption. I don't think it's a healthy way to proceed. But then, on the other hand, some people really have a medical condition and they need help, and they ought to get it if we can provide it. But I think it does seem an easy way out. As you can tell, it's very easy to get an opinion from me, even when I'm not sure what I'm talking about. I don't know enough about Ozempic, but the idea of taking it just to slim down for a normal person, to me, it seems, I'm going to sound like somebody out of, the year 200 or something, but it seems decadent. It reminds me of the Romans, feasting and then sticking a finger down their throat and vomiting, and then they can go back to feasting again. It's really kind of decadent. And, Ozempic may be a sort of a prettier version of that. But again, I'm sure there are many people who have a real medical condition and need its help.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I got a cough.
Sure.
Let me get back on my train of thought. So we've talked about, health, longevity, kind of the
Yeah.
details on that. Let's talk on a more political point. Like whenever anyone thinks of, like starvation, they think of, like Gandhi or Chavez, like you were saying. Why is that so politically charged? Like, how does it have so much power for one individual to stop eating? Because let's put it this way, like, obviously the person needs to be like a figurehead, but like, say your cousin Johnny stops, like eating because he doesn't want to eat his vegetables. You know what I mean? Like, why does it have so much power over other people?
So the idea uh, of this power, as you say, which I think it really does, and by the way, I don't think it has to be a figurehead. It can be anyone. The power of a hunger strike, it goes back a long way, and you have it in pre-Christian Ireland, where in the Druidic Ireland, where fasting was seen as a way to open a door to a spiritual realm, a magical realm. When you fasted, you were calling on otherworldly forces. And in fact, and this is all before St. Patrick came to Ireland, there were laws in ancient Ireland against illegal fasting. You could be fined for illegally fasting because it was seen as opening up this real magic. And you could fast against someone who wronged you, or
Like
someone
a
who,
curse or something like
yeah,
that.
well, yeah, but really serious. And like someone who owed you money and wouldn't acknowledge the debt, you'd go to fast in their doorway. And that person had to either right the wrong, or that person would have to fast. And so you'd have these dueling fasts. This is a long way to answer. And you find these
No,
traditions.
I find that
It's
fascinating.
really true. That they've had these books of ancient Irish law. And then and by the way, sorry, this is a footnote to that. I think, though who knows, but I think that's one of the reasons why Catholicism came so readily to Ireland in, whatever year it was, like year 200 or something.
Similar suffrage
Yeah,
or
well,
similar
because of
suffering.
the idea of fasting it's present so strong in early Christianity, and the Celts took to that pretty quickly. But and you find this tradition all over the world. You find it in India, and to this day, people fast against one another. It's called sitting in Dharna. Really interesting. So this idea of stopping, you've wronged me, and I don't have the power to, I don't have the strength, maybe the physical strength, maybe you're a chieftain or whatever. I can't overpower you. But what I can do is say I am morally correct. And the only way I can uh, tell everyone of the power of my uh, objection is that I'm going to put my life on the line and I'm not going to eat. And there's nothing you can do. You can maybe force me to eat. There's force feeding, which is a horrible process, by the way. But even that forces the person, the authority, to enter into a kind of dialogue with the hunger striker. And so this really first came into the modern era with the suffragettes or suffragists in the US, suffragettes in the
That's
UK.
funny because I accidentally said suffrage, and I
Right.
remember I forget what movie it was, but I saw the exact scene where they're like forcing eggs down.
Oh, it's a terrible thing.
Yeah,
It can really kill someone, if you can actually accidentally puncture interior organs, and it's a very violent process, really awful. But so these women, really uh, impressive women at the turn of the last century, really took up this tradition, and it really got public attention. And then they did it before the Irish Patriots took that up around the same time, around 1900, 1910. And then it spread across the world. And Gandhi was also looking at the Irish hunger strikers. And so it spread, and you don't always win, obviously, when you're on a hunger strike, but you usually get attention of the public, the media, and it's always a disruptive process for authorities because people, the by definition, the authorities want to be seen as being in control, and here you have somebody starving to death on your watch. And if you're really, I mean, you got to be pretty extreme and brutal not to care about that. And then, I mean, even in Guantanamo Bay, they were force feeding inmates who demanded the right to be put on trial and, wanted to have the chance to have their say. It's, I think it is a court of last resort. It is not a tool for somebody who's looking to die, but it's a tool for someone who feels they don't have leverage, and this is the only way they can get it. I spoke to, I don't mean to go on so long,
no, no,
Michael,
you're fine.
but I spoke to a former IRA guy who was in jail with Bobby Sands, if that name means anything to you. He was uh, a famous at the time, he was moderately well known, but he starved to death along with, I think, 9 or 10 other prisoners in a English jail in like 1980. And this guy who was in there with him, I asked him, when you guys went on this hunger strike, were you planning to give up your lives? Was this a suicidal act? And he vehemently said, absolutely not. We were healthy young men. We wanted to live, but there was no way we could get our point across to the British authorities that, we were political prisoners. We did not deserve to be treated as criminals. And this was the only way we felt we could make ourselves heard.
Oh,
I don't know if that quite answers your
no,
question,
it does.
but the
It
idea of
does.
hunger strikes, it's all over the world. At any given moment, there are people on hunger strikes, for whatever cause. Right now, of course, people objecting to what's going on in Palestine, and all over the world, people are hunger strike. There was a hunger striker in Thailand who died recently trying to change the censorship laws there. It is an effective worldwide, cross-cultural, uh, yeah, uh, cross-cultural phenomenon. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
So
You can
just to
hear I'm
touch,
excited. So,
yeah. No, it just makes me touch on kind of circling back to what we talked about earlier, how it kind of makes a level playing field. I think I was wrong
yeah,
because it's the exact opposite. You don't see, like you don't see the rich or the higher power people fasting because this kind of gives power to people who want a voice, who don't have a platform.
right. A hunger strike has got to be it's got to be done. Though, actually, I wonder what you think of this. Both Gandhi and Cesar Chavez, and Chavez had read a lot of Gandhi. Both of them did major fasts, and for that matter, also there was a big Palestinian fast in like I think the first major fast of across Israeli prisoners. In all three of those cases, they were people. In the case of Chavez and Gandhi and this early mass Palestinian fast, they were fasting against their allies. And in the case of Chavez and Gandhi, they were fasting against their supporters who were arguing that they should take up violence. And both Chavez and Gandhi were arguing strongly that the road to violence was going to doom their respective movements. And so they undertook these long fasts as a hunger strike against their supporters. And in the case of the Palestinians, it was against the Oslo Agreement, where they felt that the prisoners in Israeli jails were not being recognized. So sometimes a hunger strike is employed against one's allies, but you're absolutely right. It's almost always used, it's normally used sort of from the bottom up. And, like the climate change people who fast outside the White House and, that sort of thing.
Because the other way to look at it too is, I mean, if you look at almost every revolt, maybe not right now, but like before, let's say the 1800s, it all stems from not self-inflicted fasting, but fasting, like the French Revolution. What's that boil down to? People in the streets not being able to eat, like all this other stuff where this self-inflicted fasting makes it so much more personal, and it takes it to higher levels.
Yeah.
But
Though I'd call fasting that's not voluntary, I'd call that starvation, which to me is different. But the thing about fasting, at least the way I see it, or the way I talk about it, fasting is voluntary. And if it's imposed from the outside, as we're seeing right now around the globe in Palestine, or if it, and for that matter, as it was in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1942, when the Nazis imposed fasting on, ghetto of 360,000 people, that's starvation. That's not fasting. Yeah.
yeah, because you could say that they were just taking away one more right. 'Cause, I mean, if you look at, let's say, the 1800s, it all stems from not self-inflicted fasting, but fasting, like
Yeah.
Like you don't have like, yeah, that might be a stretch though. Uh, do you ever see this being incorporated into like mainstream healthcare practices?
I think, Michael, that's an excellent question, and I think it is. I think doctors are starting. It's a little scary for them because there's not that much widespread research. There's some absolute rock solid research that it seems to be good for you, and it helps you, as I said, reset your cells. They undergo a kind of reset. But if it becomes as common as aspirins, I don't know. It is used actually as a therapy right now and has been for many years for epileptics who people with epilepsy it's been found that regular fasting can reduce the frequency and severity of epileptic fits. But the problem is no one quite understands how that works.
Mhm.
Um, and there's still a lot of research needs to be done. I think it's pretty definitive. It's good for you if done in moderation and done carefully. We all could use some of this, and it's definitely good for your spiritual health. This cutting back, and then you can go back into it. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a permanent thing. If it's a permanent thing, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. So uh one more wrap up question just before we get to our last one. What do you hope what do you hope readers are going to take away from your book?
I guess this weird concept that uh, of the power of absence. That sometimes it's in stepping back that creation happens. That withdrawal can be a strength and a positive. That moving forward doesn't always mean consuming more and acquiring more. That you can acquire I guess that's a lot of stuff. Sometimes you can acquire power through absence.
Okay. No, that's good. And we'll talk about where we can find the book after the last question. Uh, what is something your parents did that you'd like to pass on to a next generation? Doesn't means humankind, not necessarily having kids. But and the other side of that, what is something new that you'd like to incorporate that your parents wouldn't have necessarily done?
My parents were very old when I was born, and I'm old myself. And one thing they impressed upon me, which I think is very important, is courtesy. And I hope, I'm sure I'm not as courteous as they were, but I think this sense of being polite to a stranger, to somebody whom you may never see again, is it just extends a community that I think can be very powerful. That it's recognizing someone else's humanity and just being polite. I think is a very humane thing. Uh, and I guess it's kind of old fashioned. It doesn't mean calling someone Mr. or Ms. or Miss, but it means being considerate and uh, maybe in little ways. I don't know if that's the kind of big answer you're looking for,
No,
but
no, I
I think
agree with
that,
that. Even in my own life, I feel like I don't know if it's my conscience or the idea of karma that I like to do that. Like if I'm and I also like to feel in people's else's shoes. Like if I wasn't able to open that door or
yeah,
this person has three kids, they need help with their bags, something like that.
yeah.
It's always good to put yourself in their shoes, and I would agree that too.
And the thing I'd like to pass on that didn't come from my parents would be perhaps an appreciation that of the incredible diversity of humankind and how we all benefit from this amazing mix of opinions and people and inclinations, and uh, that may be a byproduct of growing up and living in New York City, but which has its own problems, God knows, but it also has this wonderful a mix of people that I've never seen anywhere else in the world, and I've traveled around quite a bit. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we are. Some of us are very different from others of us, and that's a great thing. And it's not how I want to live, or maybe how you want to live, but that's okay. And I think we can all get strength from that. We don't all have to be the same way.
Yeah. And just like that goes to, I mean, what we talked about on fasting, it's hard to understand other points of view. And obviously, in my opinion, living in a city like New York is a lot easier to accomplish that goal rather than living somewhere where your neighbor is a mile down the road. I don't know, it's hard to understand that, especially if you've got the same, like, you don't have diversity in your neighborhood, you're not helping it. Diversifying basically your community is the biggest thing, in my opinion, on a religious, on a age, on a, like every aspect, and especially trying new things. I feel like, like if you don't try new things, you're not going to get out and meet new people. And that's the whole aspect of that.
If you're not trying to expand if you're not moving forward, yeah, yeah. And there are different ways, I guess, to move forward. It's not always about acquiring or consuming. It can be by new ways of thought.
Any facet, yeah. So John, where can everyone find your book?
Thank you, Michael. You're very nice. So people can get the book wherever books are sold. You can get it at bookshop.org. You can get it at Amazon. You can go to barnesandnoble.com. Best of all, you go to your local bookstore, and they can order it for you. It's published by Simon and Schuster, which is a big company, and has treated me very well, and I'm very glad to be published by him. And it's called The Fast, and it's by me.
Okay, sounds good. And I'll even put a link in my email so people can find that.
Thank you
Uh,
very much.
Thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, it's
Definitely
great.
expanded my view. Like I mean, I've heard about fasting, like you hear about it, you understand it to some respect, but you never think of it on so many different layers, if that
Oh,
makes sense.
oh, that's
You think
nice.
of it as a separate thing, but when you look at it as one thing and then the aspects to the core, you kind of dig deeper on what it can accomplish and the range of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you.
No,
If that's
yeah.
the case, I'm glad that I conveyed a bit of my enthusiasm.
Well, thank you and have a good night.
You too. Thanks very much.
If you like this week's episode of People More Interesting Than Me, please follow me on Apple Podcasts so you won't miss out on more episodes like these.